Hey guys, I'm Dimension Jump and today I'll be reviewing the Resident Evil 3 remake which was released back in 2020. Now, this is a remake of Resident Evil 3, of the original Resident Evil 3 which was released back in 1999. And this story follows Jill Valentine during the beginning outbreak of the Racoon City Incident. And it follows her as well as another character called Carlos as they try to find a cure, as well as Jill being stalked by this giant bioweapon called Nemesis. And this game takes you quite a bit around Raccoon City. It takes you to places like the underground station, to a big laboratory area, to even the RPD where you play in the second game. And this game is quite interesting. I do like how you get to see other stories within this one area, and I think having played Resident Evil 2 remake and this one, I think it's interesting to see how there are different stories happening at roughly the same time, because in Resident Evil 2 you've got both Claire and Leon, and in Resident Evil 3 you've got Jill and Carlos. And yeah, I think it's an interesting way of fleshing out more of what's going on and how things might happen. And yeah, I think it's a fun game. I do like how you get to switch between both Jill and Carlos, just so you can understand, well, not understand, but I would say kind of see from their perspectives, I would say, because you've got Jill, who's a member of STARS, and Carlos, who's a member of Umbrella, and they kind of help each other a bit, and you kind of get to see that from their gameplay. Because with Jill, she's trying to find out the stuff that's going on around Raccoon City, and she's being stalked by Nemesis, and then towards the later part of the game, she gets infected, and then it's up to Carlos to find a cure for Jill. And yeah, and towards the very end of the game, you have to fight a giant mutated bioweapon Nemesis, which is basically the same thing as in a lot of other Resident Evil games, where you have to fight a giant bioweapon of a particular enemy that you've been stalked by. And yeah, it's really enjoyable. And now it's time for some gameplay. So, when it comes to Resident Evil 3, it does have similar way of getting your weapons when it comes to the previous Resident Evil game, Resident Evil 2. But it's got a similar sort of format in terms of how you can rearrange your items and stuff. And I would say Claire has a bit of a combination of weapons of both Leon's route and Jill, not Claire. Jill has a combination of weapons from both Leon's route and Claire's route from Resident Evil 2, because you've got the shotgun and standard weapon from Leon's route, as well as the standard handgun from Claire's route, but also you've got the grenade launcher, which is this one, which is from Claire's route specifically. And yeah, it's very fun, and also it's kind of interesting to seeing different weapons, and also similar to other Resident Evil games, for example Resident Evil 2. Depending on how injured you are, you will see different types of animation. So for example, with Jill here, because she's taken some damage, you can kind of see her. She's kind of got a hand to her side. She's kind of limping. But if you use any kind of healing items, you can see that she's very much back to full health, and you can't see that she's limping anymore. So I think when it comes to stuff like that, it's quite interesting. And also, like with other Resident Evil games, you have a certain amount of bullets to use, and you can switch between them. So different weapons will do do different damages, and they all have their own unique different kinds of
ways of hurting enemies. So you have for the grenade launcher, you've got like flame rounds, explosive rounds, mine rounds, all of which can do different amounts of damage. Then you've got a shotgun, which is probably one of the best weapons in the game because it does a lot of damage. I think it's probably second only to the grenade launcher in this game, just because of the amount of stuff you can do with that weapon, as well as I think both the shotgun and the grenade launcher are very good when it comes to like crowd control and stuff. And yeah, that's kind of it. Like it basically follows the other Resident Evil games when it comes to gameplay. You just hit like zombies or the bioweapon in the face a couple of times until they're down. Unless they're like with the larger bioweapons like this guy, it's just you shoot it in the face. But also, this particular fight in particular, you can use a big, large gun, or just a laser gun sort of thing. Do you think it's quite interesting? And also, this does need like a couple of times to like charge up and just gets into the thing. So well, hit the bioweapon, but you do need to like for some of the batteries, you need to put them back into place. So yeah, so for a boss fight like this, it's more about trying to like move about, trying to avoid all of the attacks that the bioweapon has, and trying to make sure that you heal weaknesses and stuff. And yeah, so that's been it for the gameplay. Now it's going to go back to the review.
So overall, with Resident Evil 3 Remake, I do enjoy how you get to see a whole different other perspective during the whole zombie outbreak. And yeah, it's quite enjoyable to see or it's quite interesting to see how other people are surviving throughout this entire outbreak. And it's kind of similar to Resident Evil 2, in the sense that you get to see two different perspectives and how those characters are surviving with people that they meet within that game. And yeah, and it's filled with the same Resident Evil stuff. You've got jump scares, you've got action stuff that you get in the last hour and a half, 30 minutes of the game, ish, roughly, depending on who you ask, or something like that. I think because Resident Evil, I think as a whole, a lot of the games do have that horror element, but then for the last part of the game, it does fall into the whole action type of thing. And I think the best example I can think of is probably with the final Nemesis fight, where he becomes that giant, big bioweapon thing, and you have to like use this massive gun that requires these big batteries, and that does fall into the whole Resident Evil action-packed element that you kind of see in a lot of other Resident Evil games when they start to wrap up and start to end their games and stuff like that. So yeah, there is that as well, but overall it's quite enjoyable. Out of the two remakes in terms of the whole zombie outbreak at Racoon City, I do prefer Resident Evil 2 Remake. I think it's mainly because it's a bit more claustrophobic and a bit more fun, I would say, when compared to Resident Evil 3 Remake. And I think I still think Resident Evil 3 has some fun elements. I do like how in the hospital bit of the game, you have to fight like hordes and hordes of zombies. And that's really fun. It feels like a base under siege attack, like from a movie or something, and that's really cool. But yeah, overall, it's a very enjoyable game. I personally believe it does show another. I think it's really interesting when we get to see another person getting to experience the whole Raccoon City incident, and I also enjoy how both games show the zombie outbreak. So with Claire and Leon, it shows just a few days or so after the event has happened, or after the outbreak. But with Resident Evil 3, it shows you the entire event, or the entire outbreak happening from start to end. So starting up roughly around the time that the outbreak happens, to up to the point where there's a missile launched and it wipes out the entire zombie horde. And yeah, that's a really interesting way of seeing the whole outbreak just from start to end. And yeah, it's really enjoyable. But I do prefer 2 over 3 when it comes to the whole story, when it comes to that particular part of the story, and as well as the Resident Evil universe when it comes to that bit. So yeah, so that's been my review for Resident Evil 3 Remake. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.